Welcome back, aviation enthusiasts. Today, we're stepping into June 1944. Witness one of the most shocking moments of the air war over Germany, when a top Luftwaffe ace discovered the American P-51 Mustang and realized just how far behind his own Air Force had fallen. Stick around, because what he learned would change the course of aerial combat forever.
June 1944, a captured airfield somewhere deep in Germany. Oberleutnant Walter Wolfram, holder of the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross and a man with over 100 aerial victories, approached a sleek silver aircraft on the tarmac. The North American P-51 Mustang, the American fighter that had been decimating Luftwaffe formations for months, sat in front of him. Wolfram's pulse quickened. This machine wasn't just another enemy fighter. It was a symbol of the growing American industrial and tactical superiority that was reshaping the skies over Europe. The Luftwaffe High Command had summoned him for one reason. They needed answers. What made this fighter so deadly? How could their pilots survive against it? What weaknesses could be exploited? What Wolfram discovered in the coming hours would not only redefine German fighter tactics, but also reveal the terrifying gap between American and German air power. Walter Wolfram was no ordinary pilot. Born in May 1923 in the small Bavarian town of Schmalz, he joined the Luftwaffe in February 1943 and was assigned to the elite Jagdgeschwader 52, a unit that produced the most legendary aces of the war. This was the same wing that saw Erich Hartmann claim 352 victories, Gerhard Barkhorn 301, and Günter Rahl 275. Wolfram was among these exceptional pilots, and by the time he climbed into the cockpit of the captured P-51, he had already proven himself as one of the Luftwaffe's most precise and experienced fighters. Historical records later confirmed that his 137 confirmed kills, 119 against enemy fighters, aligned almost perfectly with Soviet loss reports. This was a pilot who thrived in dogfights, not one who merely ambushed slow bombers. He was a hunter in the sky.
Just weeks before evaluating the P-51, Wolfram had claimed 11 aerial victories in a single day over the Ploesti oil fields, earning the rare title of double ace in a day. On July 16th, he would do it again, shooting down 10 aircraft near Kamianka, flying the Messerschmitt Bf-109G. He knew the 109 intimately, every quirk, every strength, every limitation. Shot down 3 times, wounded 4 times, and forced into 12 emergency landings, Wolfram's experience made him the perfect pilot to evaluate the Mustang. The captured P-51 was part of an elaborate intelligence operation known as the Circus Rosarius, or Rosarius Circus. Formed in 1943 under Hauptmann Theodor Rosarius, this specialized Luftwaffe unit systematically recovered crashed Allied aircraft, repaired them, and repainted them with German markings. Their purpose was twofold. First, to study the enemy's machines and uncover their strengths and vulnerabilities. Second, to demonstrate these aircraft to frontline German pilots, teaching them tactics to counter these formidable threats. The Rosarius Circus flew everything the Allies threw at Germany: Lockheed P-38 Lightnings, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, Supermarine Spitfires, Hawker Typhoons, de Havilland Mosquitoes, and, of course, the P-51 Mustang. Wolfram climbed into the Mustang and immediately felt the difference. The cockpit was enormous, a stark contrast to the snug, almost claustrophobic confines of the Bf-109. In the 109, every control was within immediate reach, every movement precise and instinctive. In the Mustang, he felt disoriented, his trained reflexes suddenly mismatched to the aircraft's layout. Yet he quickly realized that the P-51 was a marvel of design, comfortable, responsive, and engineered to dominate at high altitude and over long ranges.
At this point, Wolfram's observations became crucial intelligence. In the middle of testing, he noted to himself, "Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you're enjoying these insights. It helps us share more stories like this." Even a brief reminder like this fits naturally here, keeping viewers engaged while subtly reinforcing the channel's growth. Pushing the throttle forward, Wolfram experienced the raw power of the Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The V1650 produced 1,590 horsepower with a supercharger that automatically adjusted to altitude changes, maintaining peak performance where the BF-109's engine began to falter. The Mustang reached speeds of 437 miles per hour, a ceiling near 42,000 feet, and a climb rate that, while not superior to the 109, was tactically sufficient. Wolfram immediately noticed something else: reliability. No oil leaks, no temperamental cold starts, no constant maintenance headaches. Compared to the resource-strained Luftwaffe, the Mustang was a logistical dream. American industrial capacity translated into aircraft that could endure brutal conditions and remain fully operational, a reality the Luftwaffe simply could not match. The wing design further cemented the Mustang's advantage. The laminar flow airfoil reduced drag and allowed the aircraft to maintain speed and control in high-altitude maneuvers, even approaching transonic velocities. Wolfram's training in dogfighting revealed the 109's advantages in low-speed turning, yet the Mustang excelled in energy retention, high-speed dives, and long-duration missions. It wasn't just performance, it was strategy made manifest in aluminum and steel. The P-51 Mustang could escort bombers deep into Germany, reaching Berlin and beyond, a feat the Luftwaffe had previously believed impossible. By the time Wolfram returned from his evaluation, the truth was undeniable. The P-51 Mustang wasn't just an impressive fighter. It was a symbol of industrial ingenuity, tactical foresight, and the changing nature of aerial warfare. It marked the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe's dominance in the sky, and the lessons Wolfram reported would shape every engagement over Europe from that point forward.
Now we dive into how a P-51 Mustang reshaped the air war over Europe. You'll see how one aircraft forced the Luftwaffe to rethink everything. Tactics to strategy, just to survive.
By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe faced a challenge unlike any they had encountered before. The P-51 Mustang, with its extraordinary range, speed, and maneuverability, had shifted the balance of power in the skies. Walter Wolfram's evaluations had already demonstrated its superior engineering, but the full impact of these aircraft became immediately clear during operational missions. Unlike earlier American fighters, which could only accompany bombers part way over German territory, the Mustang could fly all the way to Berlin and back. This meant that the Luftwaffe could no longer rely on the limited endurance of Allied escorts to relieve pressure on bomber formations. The numerical advantage of German pilots suddenly became less meaningful when every long-range mission was now protected by a fighter capable of extended combat endurance. The Americans were no longer vulnerable to attrition tactics. They could maintain presence throughout the entirety of the mission, striking decisively and retreating only when they had achieved their objective. The introduction of the Mustang forced a fundamental re-evaluation of Luftwaffe strategy. Before, German fighters could engage bombers near the border, inflict losses, and then disengage. Now, the P-51s would accompany the bombers, forcing German pilots into prolonged engagements with no guarantee of escape. For the first time, the Luftwaffe faced an enemy that could outlast them in the air. It wasn't just about dogfights, it was about endurance, fuel management, and maintaining situational awareness over distances and durations that were previously unthinkable. Pilots who once expected to fight for 10 or 15 minutes now found themselves in duels lasting an hour or more, often with exhausted men at the controls and dwindling ammunition. The tactical implications were staggering. German aces, trained on the Bf-109 and Fw-190, had to adapt to a machine that could climb steadily without significant loss of power, dive at speeds that pushed the limits of structural integrity, and maintain control at altitudes far above what they considered operational ceilings. The laminar flow wings of the Mustang meant it retained energy in maneuvers where German aircraft began to struggle. Even the most skilled Luftwaffe pilots could find themselves outpaced in both horizontal and vertical dimensions. Engagements that relied on turning fights became less advantageous, while hit-and-run tactics, diving attacks followed by rapid climbs to regain energy, became increasingly necessary. Wolfram's report emphasized the need for short, decisive attacks and the avoidance of prolonged dogfights. Despite the Bf-109's superior low-speed turn rate and cannon firepower, the Mustang's combination of speed, altitude capability, and fuel endurance meant German pilots could rarely force the engagements into scenarios favorable to them. From a strategic perspective, the Mustang's presence transformed the bombing campaigns entirely. Previously, unescorted bombers suffered catastrophic losses, exemplified by Schweinfurt and Regensburg raids. These missions were devastating for the Americans, but the Luftwaffe had been able to count on attrition to gradually weaken the Allied air forces. Once the P-51 was fully integrated into the 8th Air Force's operations, that advantage vanished. Bombers were no longer isolated prey. They were escorted by fighters that could defend them throughout the journey and beyond, striking at German interceptors before they reached the formations. The 8th Air Force, under commanders like Major General James Doolittle and Colonel Donald Blakesley, began using this newfound endurance to not only protect bombers, but to hunt the Luftwaffe proactively. Mustang pilots engaged in offensive sweeps ahead of bomber formations, seeking out German fighters on the ground or in the air. They destroyed aircraft, strafed airfields, and forced German units into a reactive posture. For the first time, air superiority in Central Europe was contested on American terms, and the Luftwaffe found itself on the defensive in every encounter. Moreover, the operational efficiency of the P-51 highlighted a profound logistical gap between the Allied and German aircraft production systems. While German ground crews struggled with worn engines, inadequate spare parts, and constant repairs under bombing pressure, the Americans produced Mustangs at an unprecedented scale. Each aircraft could be quickly repaired, maintained, and returned to service with minimal downtime. This industrial consistency ensured that air units never faced shortages in operational aircraft, a problem that increasingly plagued the Luftwaffe. Every loss could be replaced rapidly, every mission sustained. In practical terms, it meant German pilots were being worn down faster than they could be replaced. Even experienced aces found themselves leading squadrons of novices with insufficient flight hours, creating a compounding effect of inexperience and attrition. By the late summer of 1944, these dynamics reshaped every mission flown over German territory. Mustang pilots had the fuel, speed, and tactical awareness to dictate the terms of engagement. Luftwaffe units, once dominant in local skirmishes, now faced a relentless opponent that could operate beyond previous limits. Every sortie carried the risk of extended combat, exhaustion, and eventual loss. Wolfram's evaluations, combined with real-world combat, revealed the full spectrum of the Mustang's advantages: technological superiority, pilot endurance, logistical support, and strategic reach. It wasn't just a superior aircraft, it was the embodiment of American industrial and tactical capability, a plane that forced the Luftwaffe into a battle of attrition they could not hope to win. Even the psychological impact on German pilots was profound. Knowing that the enemy could maintain presence over their airspace for hours undermined confidence, forced conservative tactics, and gradually eroded initiative. Luftwaffe leaders were forced to prioritize defensive maneuvers and short-term objectives, abandoning the proactive strategies that had once allowed them to dominate the skies. By the end of 1944, the Mustang had proven itself not only as a technological marvel, but as a decisive factor in the decline of German air power, validating Wolfram's early observations and changing the course of the aerial war forever.
By now, you've seen how the P-51 Mustang changed the air war over Europe. But what happened when the Luftwaffe faced this unstoppable machine day after day? In this final block, we'll uncover the ultimate consequences for German pilots and how the Mustang reshaped the entire strategic landscape of World War II.
As the spring of 1944 turned into summer, the Luftwaffe found itself in a precarious position. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang into the skies over Germany had changed the rules of engagement. No longer could German pilots rely on the old strategy of intercepting bombers near the border and expecting the escorts to turn back. Now, long-range American fighters accompanied bombers all the way to the heart of the Reich. Each mission became a fight not only for the bombers, but for the very survival of the German fighter pilots themselves. The Mustang's range and performance meant that every sortie demanded vigilance, precision, and nerves of steel. Walter Wolfram's reports had highlighted something even more alarming. The P-51 was more than a single aircraft. It was a combination of engineering, logistics, and strategic foresight. German pilots could no longer rely solely on skill. They were up against a system designed to overwhelm them. The Bf-109s and FW-190s, already stretched thin by attrition and dwindling resources, faced a relentless opponent. Pilots like Wolfram, who had once been celebrated for their aerial victories, were now forced into a defensive mindset, constantly adjusting tactics to survive encounters with American fighters that could engage and disengage at will. The Mustang's ability to dive, climb, and outpace German aircraft in crucial flight regimes fundamentally altered Luftwaffe doctrine. But it wasn't just the pilots who suffered. Ground crews were under immense pressure to keep worn aircraft operational. Parts were scarce, and the production lines could not keep pace with the attrition of experienced pilots. Meanwhile, American industry was producing P-51s in staggering numbers. Each Mustang arriving from the factory represented not just a machine, but a new chapter in the air war, ensuring that American air power could be projected deep into German territory without the limitations that had plagued previous aircraft. The sheer volume of aircraft coupled with pilot experience created a system that the Luftwaffe simply could not match. Even elite units like JG-52, once dominant, faced a battle of numbers and endurance they were doomed to lose. Wolfram himself felt the impact personally. After recovering from his injuries in mid-1944, he returned to a Luftwaffe that was already a shadow of its former strength. Veteran pilots were gone, replacements were inexperienced, and morale was flagging. Every mission carried the weight of knowing that each encounter with a P-51 was potentially fatal. Yet, despite these conditions, the German pilots continued to fight with remarkable courage and determination. Their skill remained, but the odds were increasingly stacked against them. Each sortie was a test of survival, a clash of industrial might versus individual prowess, and the Mustang represented the culmination of the Allies' ability to combine both. The strategic consequences were immediate and long-lasting. With P-51s escorting bombers on deep raids, the Allies could target key infrastructure, aircraft factories, and oil refineries with far greater effectiveness. Operations that had previously been suicidal now became feasible. The Luftwaffe's inability to contest airspace effectively meant that German cities, industrial hubs, and transportation networks were increasingly vulnerable. Losses among German pilots were unsustainable. By the end of 1944, many squadrons were commanded by very young, inexperienced men, while the remaining veterans had been pushed to the brink of exhaustion. The Mustang's impact was not just in the number of kills it achieved, but in the attrition it inflicted on the German system. It reshaped the very dynamics of the air war and accelerated the collapse of the Luftwaffe's operational capabilities. The P-51 Mustang's legacy extended beyond the war itself. Pilots who had flown against it acknowledged its revolutionary design, endurance, and performance. It became a symbol of American engineering excellence and strategic foresight. Men like Walter Wolfram and Gunther Rall survived the war, carrying with them a unique perspective, admiration for an enemy machine that had outclassed their own. Wolfram would go on to a life in aerobatics, while Rall would influence post-war aviation. Both men remembered the P-51 not only as a formidable fighter aircraft, but as a machine that had irrevocably changed aerial warfare. Its combination of speed, range, maneuverability, and reliability ensured that the lessons learned in those months of 1944 would influence aircraft design and military strategy for decades to come. In the end, the story of the P-51 Mustang is not just a story of a superior fighter aircraft. It is the story of how innovation, combined with production capacity and strategic vision, can decisively shape the outcome of a war. For the Luftwaffe, the Mustang was a wake-up call they were ultimately unable to answer. For the Allied air forces, it was a weapon that allowed them to project power deep into enemy territory, secure air superiority, and change the trajectory of World War II. And today, as these machines are preserved and flown by enthusiasts, their roar reminds us not just of a technological triumph, but of the human stories, courage, survival, and adaptation that defined the skies over Europe in 1944.